spending their daylight hours hid shy of any scene. The only way he has been able to observe them successfully is to remove them from their regular aquarium. In tanks, the frogs will be unaware of Tyler's presence. Because many have died in captivity, and in recent years no more have been found in the wild, these two remain to unlock the mystery of most unusual animal behavior. Though action like this free-fall and unexplained, it is the animal's reproduction that has most electrified the world.
What is so unusual about the gastric brooding frog is the fact that it carries its young in its stomach.
Superconception follows the growth of some 24 tadpoles, until at roughly 8 weeks, the female's stomach is completely distended with fully developed frogs ready to be born.
And then babies pop up from the stomach, 1 or 2 at a time, and sit upon her tongue. And then they sit and look around, look at the world outside, and then just very, very gently step out.
Tyler's rare photo of an actual birth has made headlines around the world.
Here we have an animal which can switch off acid being produced in the stomach, and an awareness that that would be an extremely novel way of being perhaps able to treat people who might need to be able to make use of that as an advantage. For example, during the treatment for peptic ulcers, it would be so useful to be able to switch off gastric acid secretion totally for a period of time and do it very, very readily. I say there's a long, long way between what we've done so far and such a thing as a possibility. But I mean, a matter of a few years ago, no one would have dreamed that the existence of this frog with this habit could possibly occur. And so with that in mind, I don't think it's impossible or too far-fetched to maintain hopes that it may have a clinical application.
In the reptile world, Australia stands out as the continent with the largest proportion of venomous snakes. The death adder is one of the country's most poisonous snakes. Without treatment, half of its human victims will die. Like all snakes, the death adder feeds primarily on small animals like lizards. Its approach is neither timid nor aggressive, but in the end, it relies on an extraordinary device for enticing the skink within range. Wriggling its tail tip as a lure, the snake can lie quietly and wait. Attracted by what must appear to be a squirming insect, the skink draws near. The venom, 5 times more powerful than that of its cousin, the king cobra, paralyzes the muscles that control breathing, and the victim dies of asphyxiation. The Australian Reptile Park was founded by Eric Worrell, who has worked with snakes for more than 50 years.
People overseas always think of Australian animals as being koalas or kangaroos. They don't think very much about our snakes, our other reptiles, and we have the deadliest reptiles in the world.
Robin Worrell is an experienced snake handler. With careful concentration combined with skill, she has been bitten only once in 10 years. Though her snake milking demonstration may draw curious crowds, the primary goal of her work lies in the realm of science and medicine.
What I'm milking here is the mainland tiger snake. It's probably about 7 or 8 different types of tiger snakes in Australia. It's the 3rd deadliest that we have in Australia. What I'm actually doing now is just enticing the snake to bite over the rubber. The fangs are penetrating through that rubber and the venom accumulates in the bottom of the beaker. Generally we keep it...
Over the years, the venoms collected at the park have proved invaluable to laboratories developing snake bite cures.
The work we do here is vital in that it has been estimated that we save 1 life a day from snake bite. That's during the snake's active season, which is, say, from September till April. And I think that works out something around about 20,000 lives that this organisation has saved since we started.
Thanks largely to the Worrell's work, there are now antivenoms for all Australia's poisonous snakes. In addition to snakes, Australia's reptiles include some 400 species of lizards. Lacking venom as protection against predators, they depend on an impressive array of defenses and bluff. Looking like some creature from the dinosaur age, the thorny devil belongs to the group aptly called dragon lizards. Actually a squat, slow-moving, ant-eating lizard, the devil is found throughout the arid regions of Central and Western Australia and has adapted to some of the continent's harshest conditions. But perhaps its most notable adaptation is its coat of spines, a barricade of daggers warning all that might come near. Lizards abound throughout Australia. The most famous, and perhaps the most spectacular, roams the forests of the warmer northern regions. Undisturbed, the frilled lizard looks harmless enough. But in the face of an enemy, it performs with remarkable bluff. If all else fails, it need only make a hasty retreat.
It's a windy day today, isn't it?
The entire range of Australian wildlife is the domain of these two naturalists. Together, they are known as Mantis Wildlife Films. Individually, they are Australian Jim Fraser and his British-born partner, Denzi Klein. For the past 12 years, they have specialized in filming behaviors the naked eye can barely see.
There it is.
Today, the ants on Earth.
Aha, yes.
Wow, they're
There's
coming
one
out
bringing
already.
something into the nest. What is it?
It's like a bit of
Food or...
debris.
I don't know what it is.
About an inch long,
They've seen us
the
all.
formidable bulldog ant
Oh, look,
inflicts
here's
a
one.
powerful and painful sting. But to film their behavior, Jim and Denzi must collect the entire colony, perhaps as many as 400 ants.
Oops. I got stung. I got stung. Not very badly, though. That's going to take quite
The
a
foraging ants at the surface must be collected first. Only then can Jim and Denzi dig into the nest, which may be 3 to 4 feet deep.
The reason why I think that Jim and I work so well together is that we have slightly different backgrounds and we both bring slightly different skills to the partnership. It's a really good reciprocating arrangement, I think, between us.
The last one we just have this continual rapport, and I tend to be critical of her work, and she's very critical of my work, and I think it's good as a team.
Even the larvae must be taken for Jim's film sequence to be complete.
Oh, you bloody
Got you, did it?
right under the arm.
Where is it?
There.
Oh.
Oh.
There we are.
At Denzi's home, the headquarters of Mantis Films, Jim has built a plaster model based on his knowledge of the nest in the wild.
There's quite a lot of them on the glass there.
Yes, right. Well, what we'll do is coming out everywhere.
The slippery white coating at the top will prevent the ants from escaping.
It's amazing what a lot of noise they make, isn't it? Running around.
Wow. You can actually see the sting coming out and trying to sting the glass.
Going in between the sections of glass.
Look at this one here. Look at the sting.
They're not happy, are they?
Well, if I had my home uprooted like that, I wouldn't be very happy either.
Jim, I think, although they're in a bit of a panic now, you know, as soon as the Queen's settled in one of the chambers, they'll be all right.
Yes. If they're starting to slow down now. They're not quite as frantic as they were.
No, they're not. Well, some of them have found the larvae and pupae down below.
It will be 3 or 4 days before the ants settle down sufficiently for Jim to begin filming.
I worked at the Australian Museum for about 7 years, and in that time I learned how to manipulate the environment, as it were, in making miniature dioramas, and it seemed a natural thing to combine photography with the filming of small animals.
Colony life centers around the queen, whose primary function is to lay eggs. She may produce as few as 1 a day, or as many as 1 every 2 hours. Using her sharp mandibles, she gently picks up the egg and looks for a safe place to lay it down. She must be careful that the voracious developing larvae do not steal it for food. But indeed this time, it is a larva that wins out. To complete their development into adult ants, the larvae will seal themselves inside a cocoon they make by spinning silk around debris from the tunnel floor. Having adjusted to their man-made environment, the ants go about their routine. An intruder into their silent miniature world, Jim Fraser feels privileged to have witnessed little-known behavior of one of the most primitive on Earth. Millions of years of isolation in Australia have protected a group of animals that today has no living relatives on Earth. Sharing features of both ancestral reptiles and early mammals, they may offer a glimpse of how more modern mammals evolved. One of these egg-laying mammals, or monotremes, is the echidna, the spiny anteater. This small, unaggressive creature has only a tiny mouth at the end of its stick-like snout and no teeth. In the daily search for ants, it relies solely on a long, sticky tongue as its means of getting food. The echidna's only defenses, and very effective ones they are needle-sharp spines and the ability to sink out of sight in the face of danger. Digging rapidly into the hard earth, the powerful echidna can disappear within minutes. An almost impenetrable shield will be all that remains above ground. The female echidna carries a single leathery egg in a pouch that forms on her belly at the beginning of the breeding season. In about 10 days, the egg will hatch. The tiny baby nurses in the pouch for up to 2 months. By definition, a mammal is a warm-blooded, haired animal that suckles its young. The echidna qualifies in all respects. But it retains the distinctly reptilian characteristic of laying eggs. When and why other mammals stopped laying eggs and began to bear their young live remains a recurrent riddle of evolution yet to be solved. In eastern Australia's streams, rivers, and lakes is found the echidna's only living relative on Earth. Outwardly looking nothing whatever like its spiny cousin, the platypus does share its reptilian traits, including the laying of eggs. Although it is often called the duck-billed platypus, its bill is actually soft, pliable, and rubbery, quite unlike a duck's. Filled with sensitive nerves, it is a specialized adaptation for feeling out the insect larvae and crayfish on which the platypus feeds. Lacking teeth, adults grind their food between large horny plates in the jaws. Because the platypus spends much of the time burrowed in riverbanks, little of its life cycle is known. So unlike other animals as the platypus, it was considered a hoax when discovered in the late 1700s. Laymen still gaze quizzically at an animal that appears to be part mammal, part reptile, part bird. At an early date, it was named Paradoxus. So much of a paradox is the platypus that almost 2 centuries later, it remains a creature shrouded in mystery. One reason so little is known about the platypus is the extreme difficulty of keeping it in captivity. One of Australia's foremost naturalists, David Flay, has been studying the platypus for close to 50 years. Today, at his fauna reserve in Queensland, visitors can enjoy an assortment of Australian exotica, but it is the platypus most tourists come especially to see.
Well, he's going through his ordinary routine now. He's out feeding and swimming, and when he's had enough of that, which goes on for about 10 hours, right into the night, he goes back into these tunnels, curls up and goes to sleep.
It was almost 40 years ago that Flay gained worldwide fame as the first person to breed a platypus in captivity. It began in 1943 with a couple named Jack and Jill. Taken from the wild, they adjusted well to captivity and became unusually tame. Not long after mating had been observed, Jill stopped eating and disappeared into her nesting burrow. Flay suspected she must be ready to lay eggs.
It was roughly 8 weeks before we thought, as the information was at that time, that at 8 weeks the baby should be able to crawl about and swim. So we took the risk of opening up the tunnel at this point and having a look. I felt that somehow that we were doing the wrong thing, and as a proof it was the wrong thing. We found she had one solitary young one, nice and fat and in good order, but it was blind and helpless and obviously couldn't either swim or walk. We'd opened that up much too soon. We left things alone and just watched carefully from that point on, and then at a further rate, that's 16 weeks altogether, we opened the back of the tunnel again and found that the baby was alive and well. That is a tremendous relief. Well, it was relayed around the world. It was announced, I think, in New York and London. The platypus, of course, is a fabulous animal. It has always attracted a lot of attention. And it was considered impossible around about the 1930s for one to live in captivity for more than a few days. After all the years of effort, it was a tremendous thrill. We put the flag up that day.
4 decades later, not even Flay has managed to breed the platypus again. With his assistance from the University of Queensland, Dr. Frank Carrick works after dusk and at dawn when the platypus is most active. He has been studying the animal's ecology since 1972. On a good night, they may catch as many as 6, but on a bad night, their nets may turn up empty.
Okay, at least with the water being high like this, there are no snags to...
An unweighted fishing net has been laid parallel to the riverbank. The scientists check the net at regular intervals, guided by a light from shore. Although the net is designed so the animal can surface and breathe, there is always the danger of entanglement.
Gary, I think there might be an animal up the net a bit further from us there. Would you like to just put the spot on it? Excellent. Yeah, he's gone under a bit. We'll go up and get him out. Okay, just ease it up here, Jim. Here he is. Yeah, little beauty.
Get him out.
Yeah. Into the boat you go. That's a male too. Look at his spurs.
Because the male platypus has venomous spurs on his hind legs, he must be handled with extreme care. Although it's not certain, scientists speculate the spurs are used against other males in competition for females at mating time.
Excellent. You got the box there, mate? Put him in. In you go, Chief. Ah, bless you. No, in you go. That's the way. Right. That's got him. Ooh, not quite.
Yeah, check him.
Let's have a look at him. Good boy.
Once the animal is lightly sedated, Dr. Carrick can safely begin his examination. Although the platypus has existed for millions of years, significant information on its ecology has been gathered only within the last decade. And so, even the most basic data on weights and measurements are invaluable.
2100. I think really the platypus is one of the most crucial animals of all the Australian animals that we need to know much more about, both for the interests of seeing how patterns in the modern mammals evolved, and also, of course, in helping us in a rational way to ensure the platypus does continue on into the future as it has done for many millions of years. It always happens, doesn't it? It's starting to rain. Thanks, Jim. Righto, mate, you'll never notice it.
Levels of hormones in the blood help the scientists determine when and how often the male platypus is sexually active. In any wildlife study, many of the important findings come from animals that have been captured before and then followed over time. Because platypuses, for the most part, remain in a relatively small home range, Carrick hopes to entrap this animal again, a metal band identifying him as number 89.
Bit of jewelry.
Now marked and identified by his captors, number 89 is ready to be set free, to return to his burrows, his secret ways.
We going to go down with it?
No. No, I'll put him in.
Right.
No sense everyone getting wet.
With the surge of scientific research in Australia over the past 2 decades, a fascinating tableau of life has unfolded. Unlike bewildered early explorers, who saw only a topsy-turvy world of improbable-looking animals, scientists of today understand how isolation and geography helped shape the evolution of Australia's wildlife. But the puzzle is far from complete. And so it remains. Haunting questions of an ancient past echo still across this remote, exotic land. Perhaps someday, one small animal with its tiny metal band may help unlock some of the long-hidden secrets of Australia, a land that time forgot.